This is our real estate morning show where we talk all things real estate. Got a great show for you today. On my right, I got Cecilia. On my left, I have Jennifer. I'm Dylan. And I wanted to pick up where we left off last week, where we were talking about the buzz that we've been kind of feeling in the market, where we've seen a lot of deals start to happen. We've been talking with other agents, same thing. They're seeing what we're seeing. And I think you were talking about the front desk. No, you were talking about the front desk, and they're like, man, it's got to be the spring market right around the corner because our phones have not stopped ringing for appointments and showings. Yeah. And so we kind of corroborated some of those numbers just before we started filming today, and we pulled the pending, so sold conditional deals and firm deals done since March 1st till now. Today's the 12th. Okay. So we're not quite at the halfway point of the month, but in some neighborhoods or some towns, we're already seeing we're on track to either pass or hit what last March did. Okay. And so we'll jump into Richmond Hill detached. We're at 44 either sold or pending so far for March. And last March, we only hit 83. So we're on track to pass that, no problem.
83 in total for
83 for the whole month of March.
Okay.
So yeah, we're at pretty much the halfway point. We should hit that no problem, maybe even surpass it. Looking at Mississauga, on the other hand, their detached market is a little bit behind. They're at 96 pending or sold, which is fantastic. Yeah. But last March, they hit 246. Okay. So we still got a little ways to go.
So not quite halfway then at this point. Yeah.
But the fact that they're at 96 right now is a good sign. Yeah. So we might just be seeing that lag. If we see like 10, 15 more post-sold conditional today, we're right on track. So I'm not worried about them at all. Vaughan, same thing. They're down about a third right now. They're at 55 sold or pending compared to 161 for last March. So they got a little bit of traction they got to pick up. Yeah. But we've been seeing a lot of activity in Vaughan where we know that in the next couple of days we're probably going to see 50 more, no problem.
We've been showing a buyer family in Vaughan in the Patterson neighborhood now, and there are 4 properties that we saw just over the last weekend that have got offer dates for this week.
Yeah. Okay, offer
dates. Offer dates. Wow. As well, if I can backtrack to Richmond Hill, offer date on a property last night in Richmond Hill in the Westbrook, Jefferson area, 9 registered offers. Wow. So maybe, the GTA's coming back.
Yeah.
We're seeing signs. I know one of my girls in coaching, I was speaking with her on the weekend because she went into multiple offers as well on a property, and that was up outside of Cookstown. Yeah. So, we're seeing, it's all over the place that we're starting to see that buyer activity stepping up, right?
And flocking to specific listings and not having enough listings still. So. I mean, it's great. There's sometimes where we're shopping with our buyers and we're like, we got a lot to choose from. Yeah. But ultimately, some people are still landing on, there's like 4 choice ones and the rest are whatever, either still overpriced or not quite where we want to be. Aurora's looking good at 23 compared to 42 last year, so we're on track to beat.
On track,
yeah, we're looking good. Good. Whitby at 51 compared to 98 last March, so they're well on track. The same thing, they might cross that 100 barrier for detached sales for the month.
Wow. Yeah,
right, looking good.
It's nice to see.
Yeah, nice little pulse on what's going on in the market right now. I think that's a great little snapshot. Yeah. I want to jump right into talking about the B20 guidelines. We talk about them a lot on the show and a lot with our clients these days. When they first came out, we were looking at some people that could have afforded, first-time home buyers specifically, that could have afforded the townhome. Then the guidelines come in and they're looking back at condos.
Yeah, exactly.
So I think we've talked a lot about what's going on in this market. There's people that have been sidelined. That's why we're not seeing as much sales because either they're holding out for the one that they really want.
Yes.
And now maybe we're starting to see some kind of adjust and either go for the condo instead. Or do you think that's accurate to say?
I think so. I think that we've come around on the fact that this is the market and that your options are your options and people waiting for it to adjust or waiting to okay, well, I'll just wait and then I'll be able to get this, or house prices are going to keep coming down so it'll come down into my range. I think all of that speculation has now been kind of cleared out, right? It's not really realistic. Like, the market is the market, and I think buyers are just kind of going, okay, well, if I want to buy, these are my options. And, traditionally we know the market will at some point go back up, so it makes more sense to get in now than to wait and then get
and price-wise, we've the Treb stats every month have shown that we've well over bottomed out. We're coming up back up. Overall, we're coming up pretty steady. Right. Certain areas are still have their 1 month up, 1 month down. Like Richmond Hill does that. The detached market, 1 up, 1 down. Just kind of how it's looking. But definitely, in the current view, there's no downward slide happening. So you have to accept where the market's at. But anyways, the reason I bring this up is we talked a little bit about it on the show last week. how the Ryerson report came out and they made suggestions for where we could put more housing.
Yes, of course.
Get a little bit more inventory
Yes.
back in the market. And it's going to be something that's very needed for the GTA in general with how many people we have coming here.
Yeah.
But in that same report, they talk about the B20 guidelines and saying that there was a lot of intended results and unintended results, right? And so a lot of people, when you look at these guidelines, because there was so much in the news at the time when they came out about what are we doing with the GTA's runaway home prices and how are we going to adjust this market, that we think that that's what the B20 was for. But the assistant superintendent of OSFI, in their words, that's not what they were doing. They were just trying to tighten the underwriting guidelines and protect borrowers from overextending.
Yeah, from extending, of course.
The market
yeah.
cooling and adjusting, both sales and price-wise, that was an unintended result of everything that had happened there.
But clearly,
I mean,
it was a result.
Yeah.
Yes.
I don't know if you can claim that to be unintended, though, because when you start to tighten lending regulations and it impacts what people can and can't spend, that's going to have an inherent impact on the market. So to say that it wouldn't, or you didn't expect that is, you know.
Well, and I don't think they're saying it wasn't what they were intending. Like, their point of doing it, because their whole guideline, their mandate is to protect the borrowing and the debt loads and stuff like that. That's what they were focused on. I think like we said, everybody can see that it's obvious there's going to be other impacts based on that when people can't get the lending. And so anyways, these guys have come out in their report and said that obviously we can't fault them for this happening. That, you know, that's what their job is. That's what they're supposed to do. However, because it's done so great, the margin of safety has come back, that they think that it would be fair to take a look at the B20 and adjust accordingly.
Right.
Which makes sense, right?
Well, I think that there's a few of us that are lobbying them to reconsider and to make adjustments to this program. I mean, you know, TREB itself have been doing that on our behalf. Yeah. You know, make some changes here now. Things have settled down. Now make some changes again.
And I think I agree with that. I was reading an article the other day saying too that over the past year, the household debt levels have dropped significantly. I think they're back down to like a 36-year low right now. Yeah. And a lot of it is because of this. So absolutely fantastic positives in that it did protect a lot of people from getting way off track and exposing what they can and can't actually afford to spend versus what people are willing to lend them, right? Yeah. Which was the big thing. But now that we've had that adjustment, let's now look at it again and go, okay, well, so there was some positives, but there's also some pretty significant negatives. And how do we shift that so that those buyers can get back into that market, but still be realistic about the price points?
Yes.
Right?
Yeah, the important thing that I think has also been talked about a lot lately is Canada in general, the goal of home ownership for its citizens is a very important thing. It's very up there, and that is drifting away from us. Yes. And a lot of that is obviously we're becoming very international and prices and our interest rates and whatnot. But that is still the goal. Yeah. And so whether they're making suggestions for how do we get more housing and affordable and mid-level housing out there, or if it's saying, hey, you know, we did regulate, we protected everybody, but now because the market conditions have changed, we can adjust those guidelines a little bit so that home ownership is still viable for the millennials coming up and everybody else, right?
It's Ipsos survey that's across Canada that says the Canadians still have home ownership as their number, you know, it's the number three. It's the number 3 concern. So it is that middle housing that really we need, which will provide the housing, provide affordable housing, and give people options for what's going to suit them, and their families.
Yeah.
Absolutely. All right, so our next topic that I want to discuss is something that when we sit down with every client, it's usually one of the first things we talk about is do we sell first or buy first?
Absolutely.
It's very important, especially in changing markets. We've been through where the answer to this has varied a lot over recent years. Sure. And so it's an important question to discuss. And I think the thing we can all agree on is obviously there's risks on both sides. That's why everybody always asks, do I sell first or buy first? Sometimes people don't know to ask that, but that becomes part of the discussion. And so just before we jump into it, what would be a quick answer if I was a client and asked you, do I sell first or buy first?
Is there a quick answer? I think for me, what I would traditionally say would just be that it's very dependent on what's happening in your local neighborhood, and let's review the market stats, and then we can make an educated decision. I don't think there is a quick answer, in my opinion.
That's a great quick answer.
That's a great quick answer, and I think that it does vary neighborhood to neighborhood, and certainly client to client. Their own personal risk factor You know,
Yeah.
some folks can tolerate
Right.
risk and excitement of a journey of buying and selling, and some folks just don't do that so very well. So besides the fact of are you selling in a buyer's market, or are you buying in a buyer's market or a seller's market? You know, what's your risk tolerance?
Right.
Yeah.
And I think that has to be discovered through your consultation.
Yeah, you guys hit on all the key points that I would discuss, right?
Would you look
You guys
at
must have
that?
been doing this for a little while. Yeah, I would say this. I would say the exact same things. One, obviously, there is no right answer. Anybody that tries to tell you to do one versus the other without looking at the things that you guys discussed is
Absolutely.
definitely giving the wrong advice.
Yes.
Yeah.
Because, and we've seen that change obviously through the general market over the years. But each neighborhood is different. Like you could go down somewhere in the city and you better be selling first before you buy because you might not find the one that you want.
Yeah.
And then you come up to York Region where we've had a little bit of a slower time, and it's like if you sold first, and then you might if you bought first, you'd be in a lot of trouble because it might take you a long time to sell that.
Yeah, unless you got a really long closing on that bad boy,
Yeah.
you could be carrying two properties, right?
Yeah.
Which
So it's
most
important to
people
look.
don't want to do, obviously.
Yeah, exactly. It's important to look at both your markets, right? Where you're buying, what's that market look like? Is there a lot of inventory? Is there a lot of the home that you want?
Yeah, the type of product.
Right, 'cause
that
you
it
can
is that
That's
you're
a big
buying,
part
That's
the
a big
type
part of it.
product
Part
that
of
you're
it.
selling.
You could
Yeah.
easily look at it and be like, oh man, there's so much inventory there,
Yeah.
nothing's moving, we got tons of choice, and then you get into the market and you're like, oh, but there's only one in the specific pocket
Yes.
in that neighborhood that I want, or there's only one that has the south-facing backyard that I
yes.
want,
Yeah.
and everybody else is competing for it too. So you could be in a buyer's market, your product could be very much a seller's market and be the one that you have to compete for.
Absolutely
Right.
true.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah.
and then same thing, obviously looking at where you're selling, making sure that you can do that in a timely manner and still.
Right. Yeah. If
still
it's
do it
going to
there.
take you 60 days or 90 days to sell your house, hypothetically, I mean, you're not going to be going and buying something and then trying to sell. It just logically just doesn't make sense, right? So you have to take into account both the markets and then, as C said, what can you tolerate, right?
Yes. That talking about the risk then, obviously having backup plans, like what happens if I sold first and I couldn't find the home that I wanted, or vice versa. What happened if I bought first and then I couldn't sell? How long can I carry both houses?
Yeah.
What am I going to do in between? How much is this going to cost me? Do I have that back?
Yeah.
And so I think the risk factor isn't just on the financials, like if you have the money to carry both or whatever. I think it's also what phase of your buying cycle are you at?
Right.
If you're a first timer or you're in that, we're buying and selling, so you're making your move up buy. But if you're going from a condo to a townhouse, where this isn't going to be your forever home, and a lot of the townhomes are very similar anyway, there isn't as much risk there if you got caught one way or the other, because there's going to be a lot of townhomes to choose from.
Exactly.
And you're going to be there 4 or 5 years anyway.
And there's limited layouts and styles and
Exactly.
exposure and all that stuff. Yeah.
But now if you're buying your dream home,
Right.
that's one that I want to make
Yeah.
sure that I have enough time to really make the right choice, buy the right one. I don't want to be in a situation where I have to move. So even if I am selling first because I need to, because that's what's going on in my market, I got to make sure I sell. But then I want to make sure I have that really long closing, or I have a backup plan where I can look for that dream home long enough.
Yeah.
Yeah,
to make
and
sure
your
that I'm
backup
getting
plan is where you're going to put your head down at night, and
Yeah.
what's your storage going to cost you, and those sorts
Right,
of things, right?
and-
And what is your time limit that you're setting to have this
Yeah.
happen? There has to be the plan B and plan C.
Yeah, and looking at what your options, right? Do you go live with somebody in the interim, and is that an option for you? And what's that going to look like? Do you want to get into renting for a year at a cheaper rent price? And not that those exist that much anymore, but in order to give yourself the time that you want to look, and then be willing to potentially eat some month's rent if you find something.
Yeah.
So there's so many different variables to what makes sense,
And that's a perfect one, because the next step up from buying the dream home is the guys that are downsizing. Say they're moving out of the neighborhood that they've been in for so long. They're like, okay, I want to get the right one because this is where I'm going to spend my twilight years. It's not the dream, cherry on top
Right.
home, but it's still where I'm going to spend
Yeah.
my time, and I've got the money.
yeah.
But I don't know this neighborhood very well, so
Right.
maybe I will go rent there for a year while I decide what I'm going to
Absolutely.
do. And we've seen a lot of
Yes.
people in
We've
our
seen a
database
lot
have
of
done
folks
that.
do that. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah,
And
absolutely.
it makes sense, right? Renting, if you're moving to a new area or you're not sure what it is you want or what you're looking for, renting for a year is not a bad plan, and see what you really think of it. As long as you have the money that you don't mind that you're expending that monthly income that is really not going to come back to you, right?
Yeah.
But beyond that, if that's a short-term decision you make to make sure that you're investing properly for yourself and the lifestyle you want, of course do that.
Yeah, it's a
right?
great thing to do. And that all comes down to, a really in-depth consultation that you have with your clients, right? To explore all of those options.
Absolutely. I'm going to cut us right there and move right into renting to own, because you guys were talking about this the other day. And so I wanted to hear kind of your thoughts on it. One, maybe tell me a little bit about the process, and is it something that
for sure.
you would do or recommend?
So rent to own has been coming up a fair bit, which is I think why we were chatting about it. We've been hearing about it more in the market especially for those first time buyers.
It makes a lot of sense that
having a hard time, right?
Yeah.
And so really the general best quick explanation I can give of it, because it can get in depth, right?
Yeah.
But an overview of it is that you would sign a lease contract with an intention and clauses to state that after the intended time period, whether it's 2 years, whatever, you're going to buy that house from the seller. So there's a set rent amount, a portion of which is taken and put towards your down payment. So it helps the buyer save for the down payment. And there's an agreed price. So it's generally based on today's market price. That's a general quick summary of what it is. So
there's some upsides in there,
There's
right?
pros and cons to it for both the buyer and for the seller. Obviously, the main pros kind of swing on, I would say, in favor of the buyer, it seems. Just being that obviously it gives you time if you have credit issues or you need to save up a little bit or you're kind of waiting to get a higher income to get approval for your mortgage. It gives you that time to do that, but you still get to live in the house that you want to buy in the interim, and you're locking it in at today's market rate. So if the market continues to go up, that's not negotiable for the seller at the end date, right? The other thing is you can also choose not to actually go through with it. So you could do your 2-year lease and then say, well, I'm not going to buy the property. And the seller has no control over that. So there's a few factors there that make it quite lucrative, not lucrative, but quite beneficial, for a buyer in that type of situation. The pros for the seller on the flip side are that you have somebody in the property who's invested and wants to take over ownership, so there's going to be a higher level of care. And traditionally, majority of the maintenance of the property goes to the tenant at that point. So anything that happens with the property, the tenant, who's the intended next owner, is actually going to be responsible for those repairs.
Right.
So there's not much investment in cost or management from the seller. The only big downside, one of the big downsides would be if the market goes up and you've agreed to 2 years ago's market price, you're potentially leaving a lot of money on the table. You're also, if the buyer or the tenant chooses not to go through with the deal, you get to keep any of the investment and money that's been put into the property, plus the initial deposit on the property. So you're not
that's
losing
a good point.
that.
Yeah, so there is, the buyer can't just walk away without a penalty on the deal.
No, there is a penalty.
There's a penalty.
For sure, that's good. And that protects the seller there as well.
And I think, unless I skip, without getting into the nuts, that's a general summary. I think that's as much as you'd need to know right now just to understand the process. But it's becoming more and more sought after because of the market that we're in. So I don't know, what are your thoughts on it in regard to, would you advise a buyer to do it or a seller to do it, or what approach do you take here? Because for some people it is their only option, at least for buyers, right? Sellers, they have to choose it.
Yeah, I think this is just like the B lending option, right? We're trying to make sure that there's options for everybody to get into home ownership. It's not the main avenue I would ever really recommend, but if it's the only option, or if that's the way that somebody can do it.
And I think that too, for some landlords, especially the absentee landlords, say, the folks that bought through the peak of the market, they're absentee, they're not locally living. First intentions may have been to resell that property, but the market came to a halt, so they have them rented rather than being vacant, but the market is not there yet for them to recover their initial investment. So if they can kind of wash their hands of the responsibility of it, or take a step back from it, have a tenant in there for a year or two with the intentions to buy, it's not so bad for them, because if it is the buyer that bought 2 years ago, it's going to be some time before that money comes back to them anyway. Right. So that homeowner may be one that would be interested to engage with the buyer on a rent to own.
And it's so funny that this is more of a topic now, because prior to the adjustments in 2017, excuse me, we were finding more sellers, like the empty nesters, that would sell their home and then rent it back from the investor.
Yes.
Because they
Yes,
didn't want to go anywhere yet, but they
Yeah.
wanted to cash out.
Yeah.
Yes.
Right, so that's still
Yeah.
a different side of a rent to own. It's
Yeah.
more so sell to rent.
Yes.
Yeah, it's like I'm
Own
gonna,
to rent.
I'm gonna cash out, but then
Yeah.
I'm gonna stay
Yeah.
living
But
in
I'm
it
gonna
for a
stay.
year, but I'm gonna rent it back from the person who
Yeah.
bought it, right?
Perfect.
Yeah.
I think that's a
Yeah.
great little overview
Yeah.
for some rent to own talk. And you want to talk a little bit about Mississauga.
Yeah.
There's some news out there about what the mayor's been talking about in terms of where Mississauga sits.
Yeah, just a quick kind of overcast. So basically, the mayor has come out and said that Mississauga has, for quite some time now, actually since 1974, believe it or not, wanted to come out of the umbrella of Peel Region.
Right.
And now that with Doug Ford's kind of cost-efficient government, it's becoming more of a conversation that's actually being considered, because what they're looking at is what that means for Mississauga. And so right now, it's obviously Mississauga, Brampton, and I think Oakville, right? Or Caledon are part of that Peel group. I don't think Oakville is actually. I think it's Caledon. So Brampton is a large industrial, and there is residential, but there's a significant industrial element. And Caledon is mainly rural, whereas Mississauga has the most taxpayers, the most infrastructure, and all of the utilities and the services are being lumped under one Peel region, umbrella. I'm going to use that term again, right?
Essentially, they're paying
but
for a lot.
Mississauga is
They're paying for
paying
everything.
for
Yeah.
everything, and looking at their numbers and going, that's a significant amount of money that if we were our own independent city with our own services and our own structure, that we could then put back into Mississauga itself. And why are we responsible for helping Brampton and Caledon kind of keep up with the infrastructure needed when we're so very different at this point? And it is I think it's the third biggest city in Ontario right now. So like they're significantly large, and they have more people coming into Mississauga to work than they do leaving it to go to work now. So there's also becoming a commuter city, so they need more. And so they're looking at it. So the mayor is basically saying that they're pushing quite hard, and they're updating the numbers right now. They've put the petition forward to the government. They've got, they've put it out to the public for feel and that sort of stuff to see what that would look like with the potential to make that shift.
So did they mention any downsides to Mississauga doing this for Mississauga residents? Because everything I'm hearing sounds like if I'm a Mississauga resident, this bodes well for me if they become their own thing.
The article clearly didn't.
Yeah.
Because it was an interview with the
it was
mayor.
Yeah.
So
It's very pro.
it was very specific
Yeah.
to what the benefits would be. I don't know. I would assume that there could be some shifts in taxes and things of that nature. Obviously, then the having the systems, the utilities, and all of that in place would be specific to Mississauga. So they'd have to make sure that that was at a level that was capable of taking care of the city itself. And so I'm sure there's going to be costs and changes and repercussions that would come from it. They weren't listed.
Right.
Yeah.
Okay. Do you want to add anything to that?
Well, I'm just thinking about, again, that exclusivity, or that,
like taking care of the other
Taking
guys,
care of
right?
the
Because
other guys.
I think that's the big negatives there is
Yeah.
what happens to the smaller towns if
Yeah.
everybody there gets broken up, or if there isn't enough
Sure.
tax base. Do we see some of the smaller stuff struggle or even
Yes.
fold?
Right.
Like when we're really talking about more rural areas in the region, right?
Or would it mean that the overhead costs of those areas would be less because they have less people and less strain on their city, which is true. So the tax money coming in would then provide the services or the portion that they need to pay in order to get
sounds like
protected.
the mayor of Mississauga talking right now. I think that would be his argument. I like it.
Yes.
Yeah, I like it.
Yeah.
No, but I mean, I think he's obviously, it's a valid point.
It's the mayor's
Sorry,
ability,
yeah,
sorry.
my mistake.
Yeah.
But yeah, I think that's a valid point.
Yeah,
Anyways,
so
I think that
interesting, right?
Yeah.
And what does that mean, right? If you do separate from a region, like you said, I don't have answers right now, but like what does that mean? I mean, have we seen that happen before?
No, because we have been all about amalgamation since, since whenever, right?
Yeah.
Since the 70s. So, again, that exclusivity or inclusivity is
very Quebec of Mississauga right
very,
now.
very Quebec of Mississauga. Right now. And those 905ers may just scoot around Mississauga and come to the city of Toronto that didn't isolate them. From
Hey, there you have it. That's our show for this week. Check us out on our Facebook, Instagram, and YouTube accounts where we condense this show into shorter information so you can get it where you want it. But we hope you enjoyed our show today. We had a lot of fun bringing it to you. And until next week, we'll see you soon.
We'll see you soon.